Let's beat the waiver wire for week 4. Next on Fantasy Football Today in 5. Welcome to FFT in 5. I'm Chris Towers here with Dan Schneier to talk about some week 3 injuries and then get to some players to stash on your bench for the waiver wire. And the idea here is these aren't necessarily the big exciting players that we're adding because they had a big week in week 2. We're adding them because hopefully they'll have a big week in week 3 and you'll be able to add them before that happens. So let's get to those. But first, we'll start with some injuries. And James Conner was limited at practice Thursday. It sounds like he's got a chance to play in week 3. But if he doesn't, I've asked this to a couple of people on the pod already this week. I think it's one of the big questions. Would you rather start Darrell Williams or Benjamin? And how high would you rank them?
Yeah, it'd be Darrell Williams for me based on essentially last week's usage. Is all I can have to work with. I would not rank them all that high, though, either of those two players. Darrell Williams would be outside in my in my running back 3 flexish range. Mm-hmm. What about for you there?
Yeah, I think they're both in like the 30 to 40 range. Basically, Williams, he got the goal line work last week, so we're hoping that continues because that's been a really valuable role in this Cardinals running game. I think going back to the start of the 2020 season, there have been more touchdowns scored by running backs than games played by the Arizona Cardinals. So that's a pretty good indicator of how valuable that role can be. But I don't expect him to do much otherwise. I think he'd split carries with Benjamin. Benjamin would probably get the passing games role. So I could see Benjamin actually outscoring him, but neither would be higher than a RB3 for me. And let's move on to Jerry Jeudy, who has missed practice Wednesday and Thursday with that chest/sternum injury. They keep calling him day-to-day, but I don't know. I'm not expecting him to play at this point. And obviously, I think that's really good news for Courtland Sutton. Through the period where Jerry Jeudy's played, him and Jeudy have matched each other in targets. Courtland Sutton obviously did have a big week 2, but that was mostly after Jerry Jeudy left the game. So he'll be a top 15 or 20 wide receiver for most folks. Any interest in KJ Hamler if Jerry Jeudy doesn't play?
So, yes, I do have stash interest in Hamler. The issue is Hamler's also hurt, and he's coming off such a major injury that I feel like that one could linger even longer than Jeudy. So maybe for super deep leagues, keep your eye on Tyreek Cleveland because, look, if both those guys are out, if the Hamler injury lingers and so does the Jeudy, someone else is going to have to get the football. It's not going to be an offense that just goes to Sutton and the running backs like it has the first few weeks. So I would
love if it was Albert Okwuegbunam, but not looking like that so far.
Nope.
All right, and how are you handling the Buccaneers wide receivers if Julio Jones and Chris Godwin are out as expected?
Yeah,
and Mike Evans obviously suspended.
Yes, suspended. I'm gonna regret it, but I might dive back into buying into Russell Gage for this week. I know it hasn't been pretty yet, but the volume hasn't been awful so far. So I would say Gage would be the one that I have my eye on the most. But we could see a random Scotty Miller week any of these weeks.
Yeah, Tom Brady has struggled to complete deep passes, but he's been targeting Scotty Miller. He just hasn't hit on them. There was one that could have been a touchdown in that most recent game. So, yeah, Scotty Miller in your deep leagues, maybe more like a DFS flyer. Same with Brashad Perryman, although he was limited in practice earlier this week. I think he is going to play.
Yep.
Let's move on to some of those waiver wire stashes. Who are you making sure is on your bench if they're out there in your leagues?
Yeah, so the first one you got to make sure is on your bench is Sky Moore, the Chiefs rookie receiver in the 2nd round pick. So it's been bad for Moore. He's mostly played special teams for the first 2 weeks. But literally, offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy said, I guarantee you'll see him on the field more moving forward. That's as good as it gets.
In fairness, based on his week 2 usage, that could mean 3 snaps.
Yes, it could mean 13 snaps like his week 1 usage too.
Yeah.
But I think the clear thing is they want to find a way to get him on the field. They drafted him for a reason after losing Tyreek Hill. So he's my number 1. My number 2 is Rondale Moore at 30%. Why? Well, I watched Greg Dortch, and that's the role they envision for Rondale Moore. It's going to happen whenever Moore is healthy enough to let that happen because they're not going to play Dortch over him. But you get a role like that Rondale Moore has, and that's a great place to be. He's 30% rostered in CBS leagues. Sky Moore was 43%. One you should always have on your bench, stashing right now, is Jameson Williams at 28%, the 1st round pick by the Lions they traded up for. You can put him in your IR spot in most leagues. Someone might already beat you to the punch here, but otherwise I like that. And one final low one, Chris, that's like under 10% that I like is Wan'Dale Robinson, the rookie second-round pick for the New York Giants at 8%. The only player who's been productive these first 2 weeks in that Giants offensive passing game on a consistent basis is Richie James, who's like a journeyman, and he's playing the role that they envisioned for Wan'Dale Robinson before he got hurt. So when Robinson is back, and that role has been 10 or 11 catches, I believe, for 100 plus change yards. So for PPR leagues, you can get him at 8% roster right now in CBS leagues. Wan'Dale Robinson, he's a nice stash.
I'll also throw out there, and this kind of goes with the first segment, but D'Onta Foreman and Chuba Hubbard. Christian McCaffrey was added to the injury report on Thursday with an ankle injury. It doesn't sound like it's going to be a problem for him in week 3, but obviously given his injury history, D'Onta Foreman and Chuba Hubbard, both 15% rostered. I would expect Foreman would be the lead back if McCaffrey was out, with Hubbard, playing more of a special teams and maybe passing downs role. But consider adding those guys just in case something happens to Christian McCaffrey. And I'll also mention Jaylen Warren is someone who, with Najee Harris's foot issue lingering since training camp, there's a chance that he suffers a setback at any point. And Jaylen Warren, I believe, has played pretty much every snap except for the ones that Najee Harris has been out there for. So those are some of the other guys. And we'll be back tomorrow morning with updates on those injuries for week 3. And we'll see you next time on Fantasy Football Today in 5.